Another round of the 2025 FIM Motocross World Championship has been and gone, and one title fight appears to be over before it's even started. The other is really quite exciting. So we have a tale of two classes, a tale of two halves on this episode of the MXGP Podcast Show, presented by Polosport and Prox or ProX, depending on where you are based. I'm of course talking about the Grand Prix of Europe, St Jean d'Angely, a famous venue in the world of motocross, Motocross of Nations host in 2011 and 2000. Very popular, and there's a lot to get into on this episode. I am your host, Lewis Phillips, and doing my best to persevere as I sit here and try to manage a conversation with on-track, off-road and paddock pass podcast man, and officially, or not quite officially yet, but very soon, published author, Adam Wheeler. How's it going?
We're in a very bizarre situation of trying to do a podcast digitally while sitting in the same room.
Yes, to be honest, I hate everything about this. I can see you in my peripheral. There's a little bit of echo, but hopefully that's not coming through in the recording. I just had to ask how you are, despite spending the last 6 hours with you. And none of it feels good to me. But never mind, we can do our very best. Initial impressions of the MXGP of Europe?
Well, we both watched footage of it, didn't we, from the press from the Birmingham Supercross. So we were keeping up. Birmingham.
Yes.
But yeah, so back to St. Jean. Enjoy your drink.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it was another weather-hit Grand Prix, wasn't it? But talk about moving from one track that could deal with it to another one. It was showery compared to the torrential rain that we saw sort of in Spain. But I think St. Jean has been, I wouldn't say vilified, but criticised in the past for being somewhat restrictive as a track, quite old school, quite stony, difficult for overtaking and passing. But I thought this Grand Prix was great. I mean, despite the inclement sort of climate and weather conditions, there was some great action. MX2, after our kind of musing on the merits of EMX 250 and MX2 in last week's show, Lewis, I think the 250 boys kind of rallied to the cause because that was the entertainment highlight of the weekend.
I think this was a perfect example of what the first European Grand Prix of the season should be. An established venue, one that will welcome many fans, and as you say, one that is capable of hosting all sorts of weather conditions, classes, types of people, whatever you have or desire, St. Jean can do it. So maybe a misstep to place this 1 week later than Kozar, but I think that lesson has been well learned within the In-Front Moto Racing HQ now.
Yeah, Jean-Marie and his team, at St. Jean, do a fantastic job. I mean, whether it's track preparation, the organisation of the facility, I mean, it is a prime motocross circuit in Europe. Like you said twice, a motocross of nations sort of 20 years or so. I mean, the track for me, for having been there for so many years, it tends to be a little divisive. I find it very good on certain occasions. It does produce good racing. On other times, it's very kind of follow my leader. But and also it has that kind of nice element to it where if you get it wrong, if you make a mistake, as we saw with the likes of say Sasha Kuna, and we can talk about him in a moment, then it really can bite you. But I mean, we had the winners. We had Tim Geiger going 2 for 2, or 2 wins in a row, and Andrea Adamo. And you were being quite critical of my how can I say it? The fact that I rate him quite a bit. Random. He's a former world champion.
Fandom.
Oh, fandom. No, I don't. No, I wouldn't say it's fandom. I just think he's a pretty good rider and probably better than most people do. I think he's back to sort of riding how he was sort of in 2023.
He's your Ben Watson.
No, I wouldn't put it that way.
I think
he's a good rider. That's all.
At some point, we should definitely cover the fact that I kind of stole Ben Watson from you. And maybe I don't actually. I haven't actually stolen him. I just have in my own mind. But certainly, there was a little bit of foul play, you could say, with my acquisition of the one and only, who we will get into on this podcast. Because what a Grand Prix for him! But one more on St. Jean. Curious on your take on this. I much prefer Ernée to St. Jean, and I don't really know why. I think it's just personal preference. I have better memories of Ernée. That probably comes to mind as well. But I certainly rank Ernay as number one French venue, and St Jean Villas are kind of interchangeable to me. I don't really have a preference there, but what's your perspective?
I prefer St. John. I'm interested why you prefer an A. I mean, the circuits are kind of similar. They're in like a valley setting, so you have the track on one side and the fans on, like in a natural amphitheater setting on the other. But I find Onay too tight, too restrictive. That's even worse for like a one-line sort of layout. I'm always surprised that when they host the Motocross of the Nations, it doesn't come across that bad. I've seen some terrible races in Onay. St. John, I just find, has a nice mix of sections, from high speed. You have obviously the inclines. I mean, the track as well last weekend looked incredibly sketchy. I mean, it does transform a little bit into sort of Scalextric's Cross. And the ground in St. John typically is quite stony. It tends to sort of, I don't know, I think it was Roman Feber, I think, afterwards post-race nursing like a busted lip or something. I think he...
I think that was from time to practice on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an example of how, the stones fly up and can affect the riders. But I think it was one of our colleagues at the Supercross at the weekend saying he was surprised that more athletes use handguards. I mean, if anything, St. John is one of the tracks on the GP calendar that, you think that kind of protection is absolutely necessary.
I've just realised I've made a misstep and I have left my laptop charger elsewhere. So at some point I will have to dart away from this podcast and leave you to it. So stay tuned on that part.
Professionalism, folks. Professionalism.
We actually didn't explain. So did we explain? Or was that on one of our full starts of where we are and what we're doing and how we're in the same room?
Well, we're in the same room, but we didn't explain why.
Okay, so we're in the same room. We're in the Pulp MX studio. We're both co-hosting the show tonight. And as explained last week, our video setup is very much reliant on Zoom or remote podcasting. And we had an initial issue with echoes and us being too close. So now I'm on the other side of the room, and in this move, completely forgot my laptop charger. And worryingly, I can't see an outlet near me. I can't see an outlet near me, which is my biggest concern. But never mind. I'm going to ask.
How much battery do you have?
20%.
There's no way you're going to get to the end of this podcast.
No, so I'm going to have to tee you up at some point and then go on a mission. And perhaps this isn't a topic to tee you up on because it's not quite as glamorous. But as I said pre-season, this is Tim Geiser's championship. He went 1-1-1 again. Looked impeccable, unbeatable. You could argue maybe that's a bit harsh because Roman did come through the pack twice and maybe didn't have a fair shot at him. But I fully believe this championship is effectively done, and that's quite extreme, I know, but I have not seen enough, and with the Renault news as well, I've not seen enough to convince me that this is going to go down to the wire. Answer that whilst I retrieve my charger.
I mean, to say that the championship is done is, goodness, that's an exaggeration and a half. But I do think, Tim is clicking into some sort of decent run of form. And I mean, even February, in that same interview I mentioned where he was showing a busted lip, was commenting on the fact that he needs to do something about the Honda rider because Geiger has a, obviously an advantage in the points already. He's been the main man in two, like we said, rain hit races, but then kind of different conditions. The key thing for Geiger at the weekend, Lewis, was the fact that he made two good starts. And at St. Jean, along that long start straight and the uphill right-hander that sort of cuts back on itself, I mean, that's kind of essential for podium contention because riders can come through, they can make the difference in some places because it does get very technical when St. John's wet and it cuts up and those ruts become extremely deep. Not only do they get deep, but just the way to enter and exit those ruts gets very bumpy as well, and that was something that required like full commitment from the riders. And Geiger, I see him really confident with his setup, and the fact that he got those starts was the foundation of his Grand Prix win. And we talk, I think, routinely on this podcast about the merits of Paul Malin as a commentator, but I mean, Paul's was doing really well with the statistics again this weekend. I think he said that Geiger now has 4 Grand Prix wins at St. Jean, so he's got good pedigree at the circuit, and these are the kind of rough, edgy conditions that he's suited to. I mean, he took his first ever career victory now 51 ago at de Trento, which can be kind of similar to St. John in a way in terms of the hard packed stony ground. This was a good arena for Geiger to put his stamp.
Well, welcome back to myself, first of all. But as teased last week, now with this Grand Prix win, Geiser has tied Jeffrey Herlings in the 450 win category, and with 2 moto wins has moved 1 moto win ahead. So I think those are crucial statistics to consider, especially as the return of Jeffrey Herlings looms. But
He's going to be chewed up by that. Do you think? I mean, Jeffrey's going to be motivated because has anyone ever passed him for statistics ever? He's just been sailing up the ladder.
what a very good point. You know what? Probably not. Maybe in the early, obviously it would have been in the early 450 days, say he got his second Grand Prix win and then someone else edged ahead maybe. But then actually, maybe that doesn't even make sense in my mind. This may be the first time that someone has moved ahead of him. I picture Monsters Inc. with the scare board and when Randall moved above Sully for the first time and then Sully did a scare and they went, never mind, that could be Sardinia. You know my reference?
Do you subscribe to Disney Plus?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay, so you've worked your way through the Pixar kind of box set.
Pixar was my childhood, Adam.
But
was that not an incredibly accurate representation of the situation?
Yeah, I just had Monsters Inc. in my head afterwards, which is a very good film. I kind of like Monsters University as well. Being the father of 2 children, you do tend to watch a lot of Pixar movies, but
or just if you're Lewis.
Yeah. But yeah, Jeffrey, having your statistics or your achievements beaten is something, of course, he's going to have to get used to, because there will be another Jeffrey Herlings one day who will win, say, 6 world titles. We never thought Stefan Everts's 101 Grand Prix win tally would be beaten, and it was. So you'd have to expect that sometime in the future, Herlings is his own personal stack of Grand Prix wins is going to be beaten as well, even though he's still adding to it. But it's this. But this is unusual that one of his contemporaries is actually sort of racking up the numbers. But as you said quite rightly, the championship is looking good, but it's far from won. But Geiger is going to be he's going to be fleshing out those statistics all the way through the rest of the year.
I think the position of these statistics in the narrative is quite fascinating, because although it's impossible to prove, there's long been a narrative that when Jeffrey Herlings isn't on the track, Tim Geiser is a more complete rider. And dare I say that thus far in 2025, I've seen the Tim Geiser from 2022, when Jeffrey wasn't on track, versus the 2024 Geiser that was just missing something. It does seem that when Jeffrey's absent, Tim just finds something. Or maybe it's the fact that he's compared then to his peers, which when you remove an all-time great like Herlings, he then seems superior even though he's operating exactly the same. That could be it completely. That would make sense. But I do feel as though this could potentially change as Herlings gets up to speed, and maybe that does help Renault and Febvre moving forward.
Well, how about some analysis in this way? Maybe in the seasons when Herlings hasn't been there, then Geiger's maybe riding at 70-80%, to win his races or to take his podiums and to accumulate that points total that's given him championships. When Herlings is there, Geiger maybe has to put the extra 5 or 10% on what he's doing, and then that's when there are extra mistakes. The margin for success comes down a little bit. That having to go closer and closer to the limit is maybe one area in which he can't deal with so well. So it's something that he can measure for the rest of this year, because if Herlings appears at round 4 in Sardinia, then he's still not going to be 100% sort of race ready, even though like I told you before, I'd still put money on the fact that he finishes on the podium. But it'll be good. It'll be cool to analyze Tim's riding and his approach when Herlings is there and pushing the envelope a little bit more. And also, again, to repeat ourselves from Spain, we don't want to do a disservice to people. I mean, I know Renault had that fresh injury worry, but Febvre, like you said, pushed him pretty close, Geiger that is, for the win. So it's not like he can just completely throttle off and just coast to this thing, because he is going to have some trouble on the way.
29 points after 3 rounds is staggering, though, and especially staggering when you consider he was behind after round 1. To transform that into a 29-point advantage in 2 rounds is staggering.
Didn't he
That's
lose the title by 20 points
last
last
year.
year?
It would
Yeah.
have been around that, wouldn't it? 14, I want to say, rings a
What
bell.
was
But
it? It was almost 1,000 points, and he lost the title by sort of 20 points to Prado. So he's already got that gap after 3 rounds.
it just makes me wonder if Tim had come out in Argentina firing on all cylinders, as some of us, like myself, expected. We could be looking at a 40-point lead after round 3. And it's that makes me so adamant that this title fight doesn't have legs or life. Putting your desire for competition aside, is there a way, and I'll ask you this very point blank, is there a way that Tim Geiser loses this championship without injury?
On this evidence, no. I mean, I think you're right. He was quite pointed as well in his post-race, interview by saying, we've been working really hard in the winter on setup for the sand. And in Riola Sardo, if you see Kaiser in this sort of vein and form and potential again, then it's even more over. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's even more difficult for the others, let's put it that way.
And yeah, I don't want to do a disservice to Roman Federer because that second moto ride, I believe it was second moto specifically, superb. Maybe still doesn't quite look like the best Roman Federer to me. I don't know if that's fair. That could just be personal preference. But the results don't lie. The lap chart doesn't lie. That was a great ride. I just still don't believe that with a start, the outcome would have been much different. I feel like second was Roman's ceiling on this day.
Yeah, good call. I don't think that's unfair. But then, at the moment, Federer doesn't have everything quite put together, whether it is starts or a little bit of confidence, whether that sort of adversity on Saturday came into play whatsoever, because this was one race that, in the past as well, we've seen him desperate to win, and we've seen some sort of vintage Federer speed, especially because, his throttle control and his feeling, we've mentioned this numerous times before, that's probably one of his strongest sort of attributes, is tailor-made to that circuit, where St. Jean can be so slick and difficult to find decent traction. I just thought, looking at the track in certain places, it was a nightmare. If you didn't have ruts, then you had sort of very flat, kind of treacherous places where you'd think, where on earth do you find the grip there? But, I think it was not a playground for Federer, but it's been good to him in the past. And, it was also a doff of the cap as well to what Geiger's able to do to stay ahead of him.
I have to chuckle, and I find myself thinking about this a lot. Rewind 9 years to St. Jean, and it was Geiser versus Federer for the overall win. How can we be 9 years on and the landscape of the series has ultimately not changed at all? It makes no sense to me, and makes me wonder about the state of the sport, of the state of competition. Like, I don't think that's a good thing, to be 9 years on and basically talking about exactly the same dynamic.
No, but it's good in another way, because these riders have career longevity, and it also shows how good they are, how much they've also bounced back from some serious injuries. Both riders have broken their femur. Federer, I think, dislocated his hip rather than the femur. And they're still at the top of their game. It's also an example for some of the younger riders as well. I mean, Lucas Koenen, what is he, 19 years old, 18, 19 years old? If he can look at a career like Roman Federer, where he's in his early 30s, and say, I still want to be fighting for a race win at St. Jean, then that's nothing but praiseworthy.
Yeah, fair. Before we go any further, I think it's fair to mention this in the same bracket as Geiser and Federer. You may have seen rumours online that Jeffrey Herlings got injured on the Sunday of the St. John GP. I've spoken to him. He's fine. So you can just forget about those rumours right now. He was at a race of some kind, I'm not quite sure how to describe it, and got rear-ended by someone from a second row start position. Again, don't ask me many questions about that. And he's fine. So that's good. He's going to race Dutch Masters this weekend and then Sardinia, and he will definitely breathe new life into the MXGP class.
Should he have been at that race?
No, but who knows? I don't understand. Don't ask me to justify or explain, because I really have little to no idea of what the hell.
I mean, we know he's a racing animal, and that's the way that he either prepares mentally or physically, or in terms of just running racing laps. And there has to be merits to doing that instead of just doing empty motos by yourself, on a test track. But would it also be too hard for Jeffrey to find like a decent training partner, somebody who could pace him, somebody just to sort of? I know that he's kind of been isolated, or he's picked isolation for most of his career. That's how he's trained and done his moto work. But maybe at this stage of his career, and also wanting to get ready for a race in return, it wouldn't have been such a bad tactic. Instead of entering a local race with amateur riders and then risking that kind of injury hit. From what I understand, he wants to do the first round of the Dutch National Masters.
Yeah, he's
I'm not sure where that is. Yeah. So that couldn't have just waited for that, perhaps, and a little bit more semblance of professionalism, less risk.
Without knowing the rider who rear-ended him, I believe he was an average Joe, like you or I. So can you imagine his horror or shock or insert emotion here at rear-ending Jeffrey Herlings? Like, I can't imagine. I mean, I'd imagine it's a cool story to tell your mates, but I feel like I'd be beside myself in just disappointment and, shock. I just can't imagine. That guy might need therapy.
Oh, so imagine if he got re-injured out of that. It doesn't bear thinking about. I know you need something to salvage 2025 MXGP, Lewis, but you just shake your hand sometimes, shake your head rather. And I think also, in front or Ustream, as it was back then, were quite withering about their riders wanting to do national championships. And for some teams, it was essential, for sponsors or national distributors or whatever. It was key to their markets, but in front, or Ustream's argument was, look, save yourself a world championship racing. This is where you need to earn your money, get your results, ensure your contracts for the next years. So you kind of have to understand that viewpoint a little bit, because if Herlings had been injured in that sort of worthless race, then what a waste, because we do need him back in Grand Prix.
Yes, we desperately do. Not to go back to my pre-season mood, as we remember, I was quite buoyant after Argentina. I'm still there, just less enthralled by this title fight, let's say. I'm ready. I'm back to my stance of Geyser will have this won by May.
Okay, well, that's fair enough after 2 races back-to-back. But then he could go on a streak now where we might see Lucas Kuhnen win in Riola Sardo. Roman Febvre might pop up with a win. Maybe Glenn Coldenhoff takes 2 strong starts on, in Arco de Trento, where, as we know, it's pretty difficult to overtake sometimes. That sequence could end, and, Tim will be there diligently picking up the points and keeping that red plate. But then he kept the red plate for most of 2024, and then look what happened.
Yeah, that's true. It's not over until the fat lady sings, and I don't know a fat lady, so the chances of one singing are quite slim. Bizarrely, Lucas Kuhnen had his first MXGP podium, but I don't have much to say, because rather than it being a moment of celebration, I almost feel like it was expected and is just another box ticked en route to this GP win, which I really do feel is coming quite soon.
Don't you feel, from the footage that we saw, that they were over the moon? They were ecstatic. It was almost
just talking my personal opinion.
Ah, okay. Well, he was pumped. You can tell from Saturday when he won the qualification heat. I mean, it was, and then in the first moto finish in 3rd, that was his highest moto finish yet. Backed it up in the second moto. I mean, this was the kind of speed and also the consistency of performance that we saw quite frequently in MXGP and what we're expecting. But to be on the podium by round 3, yeah, you could say it's part of the rites of passage, but it's still quite early. That was pretty good.
I feel like landmarks like that don't really get celebrated anymore, and I don't know why. I feel like maybe it was because I was younger and maybe just more amazed by everything. But I almost feel like, and now I really do sound like the man who walked uphill to school both ways, but I really do feel like in the 2000s, a first 450 podium and similar milestones were much more poignant. I don't know.
Can you go back to that a minute? The man who walked up to school both ways.
Walked uphill to school both ways. You've never heard that?
No. What is it? What's the
brilliant.
What's the symbolism behind it?
Well, let me now. I can't believe you've not heard that. Let me now educate you for the first time in this podcast history. It's effectively the old man who, as time has gone by, he remembers his plight differently. His memory is skewed, and therefore nothing in the current day can possibly compare to what he did, hence walking uphill to school both ways as an exaggeration, as his mind is exaggerating what he went through. I think I did a terrible job of explaining that, but...
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how you walk to school 2 ways and what that's got do with learning lessons in the University of Life.
He didn't walk uphill to school both ways. It's
Right.
just a exaggeration because his mind, as time goes on, you remember things slightly differently. We're all guilty of it. I don't know.
But you're
Google
implying
it.
there's only two ways to walk to school. I mean,
Adam,
there could be more.
I'm not. I realise I'm your beacon of
you make
light
this
in
up?
life. No, no. This is an incredibly well used phrase.
Really? Is this like some, famous philosopher, some Greek philosopher? And okay. I know I appreciate the education, but I just wondered if you made it up.
No, not at all.
Okay.
I would Google it, but I think that's going to take too much time. But no, that is a very well-known phrase, unless I butchered it slightly, which is possible with me, as we know.
Okay.
One thing that's not being butchered is Matteo Guadagnini's career, because what a resurrection after some difficult years, really. There's not been much to write home about. 4th overall, backed up his great Argentina ride, buried negative memories from Kozar, where it was just a difficult time for Ducati overall. This is really quite something. Great for Ducati, but even better for Guadagnini, I'd say, because his career was effectively saved by the timeliness of this new manufacturer, which happened to be Italian.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I think that long churned up start straight was the kind of, apt sort of reaping ground, if you like, for the Desmotronic engine system and all that sort of extra torque at bottom end. But yeah, the thing is, in Guadagnini, you have to question some of his decision making, as we said in the past. Also, he's been quite a quick starter traditionally for a big guy, a tall guy. But as we've seen in more than one occasion, he would get near the whole shot, but then inexplicably run on the first corner and try to take out like 3 photographers or something, just because he couldn't get his bike turned. And in this occasion, again, pretty decent starts, putting the Ducati right up there. He seems certainly more in sync with the characteristics of the bike than Jeremy Sear at the moment. And full, fair play to the Italian. He did a sterling job. And how cool is it to see a brand new manufacturer up there in the top 5 of the MXGP standings?
Yeah, astounding, but I still go back to what I said after Argentina. This deserves more attention, more spotlight. I feel like we're already in the phase where we're just like, Ducati in the top 5? That's cool. Oh, yeah, well, that's no different to KTM being in the top 5.
Well, you mentioned the Lucas Koenen podium. Maybe then when Ducati finally get on the podium for MXGP, then that has to be bigged up, especially considering their impact in other series.
How about this then? Ducati's first podium will, you would think, inevitably happen this season. Who would you bet on right now to be the one who captures that?
Oh, Guadagnini, for sure. I mean, he seems to have something extra compared to Jeremy in terms of lap time speed. But, Sear's big thing is that he's there every week, whereas Guadagnini has dropped the ball in terms of injury or form in the last 3 seasons in the Premier class. I hope Mattia's sort of, progression continues. But, Sear's the guy who's probably working on the bike a little bit more. I mean, that's just complete speculation. I could be wrong, but he's the one that will ultimately fashion this thing into, a competitive motorcycle.
Yes. Do we want to talk about Sear? Honestly, I don't have much to add because I've not spoken to him in depth. It's not what we've come to know and love about Jeremy Sear, the results, the brilliance. Kozar, I think you can just dismiss because of the craziness of it. St. John, I certainly would have expected better, but I think he would tell you, and my bad for not checking in with him in depth since St. John yet. I have spoken to him, but not really enough to impart wisdom. But I think he would just tell you it's a process, and he knew there were going to be highs and lows, and not to worry. I think that would be where he's at.
With the fact that Ducati are close relatively to the podium by round 3 is a big surprise. Also, perhaps the rider getting those results a little bit more surprising, but again, this is like you said, something that's not going to arrive overnight. I don't think they'll be on the podium, in the next couple of Grand Prix unless there's some sort of freak event. Just watch this space, I think, but it's been extremely promising so far. But Lewis, let me ask you this thing. Who should be most worried, do you think, after these 3 rounds in the MXGP class? Is it somebody like Jago Gertz? I mean, which rider should be, looking at sort of the overall classification and the points table so far and be thinking, shit, we need to do a 180 here somehow?
Oh, I think without doubt it's Gertz. This is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I can recollect a fall from grace quite like this. And in fact, as I say that, it almost reminds me somewhat of Kevin Strybos from 07, 08, 09. It's just gone, and almost without explanation. So I don't know where his career goes. I don't know if there's really much of a rebuild coming. I just don't know. And I don't think Gertz is necessarily this incredibly mentally strong rider, so I can't imagine he's taking this in his stride either. And
But when we saw him at Redbud, he clearly can handle a 450. I mean, to do what he did on that track, it's not a fluke. Yeah, there has to be some potential there, but who knows where he's at with his head and his approach to the MXGP class at the moment after what was a horrendous 2024.
yeah, I wonder. I don't know if he's on a 2022 frame like Renault, but I wonder if that's maybe the missing ingredient here, because he would have been on that bike at Redbud in 22. It's supposedly got more stability. I actually, and this is a great transition into Renault, I spoke to Christian Craig about that at Birmingham because he raced for 22 bike outdoors. And I said to him, what would Renault be looking for? What would you think he would gain? And he immediately said stability, which would help a rider like Renault ride on that ragged edge, as he likes to do. And Gertz is a little bit like that as well. Maybe you can't comment on 450 career, but in 250s at least he was quite on the edge. So maybe that would also benefit him. At this point, I think you try everything. Paint the bike red, roll out a 22 frame, do whatever you can, because there's no glimmer of hope here. The light is out.
And for Yamaha generally, it's not looking great. I mean, Valandron didn't have a fantastic Grand Prix either. And Maxime Renault with his fresh injury concern. Something else that was kind of kept highly secret as well, Lewis.
Adam. I just want to pack up and go home, to be honest, at this point, because so we heard the rumours. Last week we alluded to the fact that Renault had got hurt before Kozar, but at the time of recording I'd been unable to confirm. Well, after the podcast, through sources not at Yamaha, I found out that he did indeed injure his hand, 2 metacarpals, and had 2 plates put in surgery on Wednesday before Kozar. I had messaged Yamaha before the podcast and said, what's the story with his injury? And got told he will be 100% for St. John. And now is the time to announce the injury 2 weeks later? Like, is it because... And you know what it is, Adam? No, I'm not even going to ask that question. I'm going to tell you. Why has this been done? Oh, the results aren't as good as we were expecting. We better tell everyone now. No. You can't have the results define whether you're going to do the correct thing or not. Rider hurt. Alert everyone. It's one of the great mysteries, because you can speak of this from a wider perspective. This isn't happening in MotoGP, is it? Like, where a rider gets hurt and then 4 weeks later, there's a PR that says, by the way, guys, last 4 weeks been hurt, so just consider that.
Yeah, if somebody's hurt, they talk about it, but the only way I can try to find a reason for it is perhaps it was related to his home Grand Prix, maybe wanting to keep it under wraps for St. John. I don't know why that would be seen as a positive thing, though. Because if you say you're hurt, okay, it tempers some expectation, but I don't think there's thousands of people that are hinging their attendance on the French Grand Prix as to whether Maxime Renault is going to be fit to fight for victory or not. Maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe the fact that he's a former world champion and he is one of the top French riders in the class was something that everybody, the promoters, Yamaha just wanted to keep sort of quiet. Or the fact that Maxime is now dealing with like a fresh kind of setback in terms of, you would imagine, his confidence a little bit, and also his physical state. That maybe it's just small reasons why it was kept under wraps, but. It is puzzling. I mean, why can't we have a bit more transparency?
It grinds my gears even more now. Renault's posted or reposted a story of him kind of hunched over in pain after the finish in St. John, and he's captioned it, "Gave it my all." And it's like, no. You can't ask for sympathy now. You can't just change. Like, if you wanted sympathy, come out and say it before Kozar. You can't now tell everyone you're fine, ignore the injury, and now play the sympathy card and want to be celebrated as a hero. No. Pick a lane. You picked your lane, so no sympathy here.
But aren't we supposed to admire his plucky courage in actually, doing a job?
Yes, I would have done had the injury been confirmed pre-Kozar. The narrative on this podcast post-Kozar would have been that of a giant, gladiator, defying the odds and giving it his all to be in the title fight. It's too late. PR School 101. It's too late.
Yeah, well, at the very least, I think, maybe Yamaha can be transparent about why, these injuries are not declared. I mean, that would help and, achieve some understanding, perhaps.
And speaking of further complaints, this is the Lewis Complaint Corner. I hear you. I see you all with MXGP TV issues. I tried to do the right thing and emailed multiple people in front who have a hand in media and whatnot, explaining that so many of you have reached out to me and I'd just like some sort of clarification.
Response?
Yeah, well, that. Or I basically said, hey, have you got some information that I can share with these people, such as we're working on it, we're aware, give us a week. No reply. So I don't know. Like, let's talk about just the whole public-facing PR game in this sport is just bizarre. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot. Like, none of it makes any sense to me. Like, so now I'm here on this podcast saying if you've got issues with MXGP TV, good luck. Who knows? Round 20 or round 4, we'll see.
We definitely need like a shouty section on this, podcast, Lewis. We need like some tantrum or something, some venting.
I just want to do a good job. I just want to do a good job. And now we're here talking about PR telling us that a rider was injured 2 weeks ago. And
yeah, but so maybe Maxim and Yamaha want to do a good job as well, and that doesn't mean airing all the suspect laundry.
Well,
I agree with what you're saying. I'm just trying to find an explanation.
Everyone's going to hate this. Everyone's going to hate me saying this, and I know it because I've made my bed. I texted Jeffrey Herlings today and said, did you get hurt yesterday? That's a rumour. Immediately hit me back. No injury. I'm fine. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. What a brilliant way to communicate with the media and just basically fill everyone in on what's happening. Thank you for that. What I should have said is, Jeffrey, did you get hurt yesterday? P.S. Please reply in 3 weeks.
Well, but by that criteria, why didn't you text Maxim?
Well, I went to Yamaha PR. I thought that was I don't have that relationship with Maxime, but I thought Yamaha PR was the way to go. I actually did message Maxime last week for an interview, and he also never replied to me, so it's not going well for Lewis. Yeah, so... back to your question about who should be worried after 3 rounds. I think it's me.
But what does Maxim and Yamaha do now for fresh injury worry? Do they continue to cover things up, or do they be utterly transparent and say, we got more problems?
Well, I was told that he will be better in France. So, and now the PR today says, or his Instagram post or something today said that he would be close to 100% in Sardinia. Boy, who cried wolf at this point. I can't believe anything. Because what will happen, Adam, is there's going to be there's a PR or an Instagram post or wherever it was today saying that Sardinia will be much better. And then in a month's time, we're going to get a PR that says Maxime Renault was much worse in Sardinia, and here's our reason why. So I don't know. I'm out. I literally don't know how you meant to do media in this sport. I don't understand.
Is it also, in this particular case, related to the fact that Jago is having such a tough time and Calvin Verlanderen is not, posting near podium potential as well? I mean, it's just not looking very shiny for Yamaha at the moment. So why would they also want to broadcast more negative news? Well,
speaking of correctness, Calvin Verlanderen has actually ridden incredibly well, in my opinion, through 3 rounds, but been dealt cruel luck with clutch issue in Kozar. First turn crash in the second moto in France. He was very banged up. I believe he's getting checked out today, but he seemed quite confident that he was fine and going to be fine for Sardinia, just fed up with the bad luck. But I'm here to give him the respect he deserves, because it's actually been a very positive start to the season. The results just do not show it in the slightest. But actually, he has a lot to hang his hat on. It needs to turn around from a luck front, and what better place than Sardinia? So look for him to bounce back and start his season there.
It does feel that there's been quite a few melees in first corners at St. John. I mean, I know it's a right-handed turn that kind of twists back on itself and goes uphill.
Well, a new first corner this year, kind of.
Yeah, but there's not really that much of a difference. It's just a very awkward first turn, and as you pointed out, it was bad luck for the South African to be kind of caught up in that.
Yeah, I just wanted to give him the credit because I feel like riders with that sort of luck maybe sometimes get overlooked. So I think it's important to highlight those stories, such as a rider riding with a broken hand in a GP.
Well, on that note, we have to give props to Paul Jonas then, because that was top 5 finish, and also I think everybody saw the drama with Roman Febvre in the first moto of the Kawasaki, where the bike was sort of smoking a lot. I mean, he confirmed that he had snapped the radiator in some area, hadn't he? That was a cause for all the steam. But Jonas, top 5, I think, as we saw, he won that sort of rain-drenched Grand Prix in Portugal last year. So we know he's kind of quick in very technical and difficult conditions. But I thought that was some pretty consistent riding from Paul's. And this is what we need. Paul Jonas needs to be a top 5 guy week in, week out.
Yeah, and also kind of highlighting the stories that need to be told or maybe reminded of. Jonas's shoulder injury last year was really quite horrific. I think it could have been a career ender, potentially. So this is just his 3rd major race back. So if he can be in the top 5 at this point and logging consistent rides, as you say, I think that's where he needs to be. And then the podiums potentially come as we near the second half. But I think for now, it's a case of walk before you can run, especially with a new machine as well, back in the factory fold. I think he is chasing setup a little bit, but who isn't? And yeah, I think a 5th place is, as you said, a commendable effort and one that is good.
Yeah.
Speaking of better than good, better than fine, great, brilliant, heroic, insert superlative here, Ben Watson. We are here. We are here and hear us roar. Bike cut out on the line in Moto 1. I always get confused between motos with these minor facts. Moto 1, I think, came all the way through the field to 14th? Yes, 14th. And then second moto similarly started last because the beta struggles with power out of the gate, and inevitably the beta riders will be starting outside the top 25 every week. I think it's time to just accept that. But once again, charged forward to 12th, battled with Jeremy Sewer along the way. These Sewer and Watson battles are great for me because I only have to focus on one portion of the screen. But no, no one will talk about Ben's ride, but he wins Rider of the Day because that was actually really good. And, on a track that you wouldn't necessarily put down as his strength. In fact, this is brilliant heading into Sardinia, which, opposite effect, is his strength. If he can somehow bag a top 20 start, which that's where we're at, it could be great. I think he's slowly rebuilding himself, and similar to Jonas, ACL injury last year, 3rd major race, it is a rebuilding process, but bloody well done to Ben.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Lewis. But then I do think we need to maybe talk about riders such as Kevin Horgmo, again, looking pretty competitive on that Honda, as well as like someone like Valentin Guillot. I mean, finishing P9. And I said a lot for Kozar and the state of that Grand Prix that Valentin Guillot makes an Instagram or a social media post saying, we're not taking part in the Grand Prix because essentially we can't afford to trash our equipment and race, which I was staggered by, because we're talking about Grand Prix motocross after all, and then he goes and proves that he's still a fast rider, he's still a capable rider in St. John d'Angeli. But I mean, talk about two extremes: not being able to compete because your budget and your parts catalog prevents you from entering sort of the swamp in Spain, and then sort of running top 8, top 9 with the best in MXGP the following week.
Yeah, Argentina was great for Guillot as well. And actually, we've done a massive disservice because this is the first time we've mentioned him this year. Kept just slipping my mind, and after each podcast, I'd beat myself up. But full privateer, kind of gambling on himself a little bit. Yamaha's always been his preferred machine. He deserves a lot of credit for what he's done so far. I want to say was he top 5 in a moto in Argentina? He certainly ran there. Yeah, 5th in the second moto. So yeah, all the credit in the world to him. And yeah, perhaps his comments on Kozar prove that the MXGP series is really just gone away from that privateer model and is more F1 MotoGP-esque now.
Yeah, in terms of the resources needed to race, for sure. I do wonder what people's views are of being sitting out a Grand Prix. It does show, it is testament also to how bad things were in Spain. But, should he have at least tried? I mean, could he not have got some assistance? I mean, who knows? Maybe if he had made a start in Kozar, he would have had a season best result. I wonder, I don't quite know where to stand on that one, because he's obviously, like we said, capable of the job, as he proved in France.
I don't know where to stand, but I think it's impossible for us to find a stance without having access to his bank account and knowing if he can actually take that risk of trashing equipment,
Yeah.
Because if the money's there, why not trash your equipment? But if this is really that tight a budget and that on the edge of making every GP, then yeah, sit out. So I think we need more information on that front before making a call.
I don't want to turn this podcast into a Yamaha bash, but also is that pretty damning towards them? Because, if one of the sort of a top 10 rider in MXGP can't contest a Grand Prix because he doesn't have sufficient parts, could someone not just throw him, a couple of components to allow him to compete?
Yeah, that is a very good point, and that would actually be a very interesting question to Alexander Kowalski.
Kowalski.
I can't say that because what my mind wants to say is Mike Wazowski.
Is Mike.
Yes. So if Valentin, that would be a question for Mike Wazowski, because you would think that does make sense. Yamaha presence outside of the factory team is important, I would think. Gifting too, of course, falls in that bracket. He's doing a phenomenal job himself. I don't know what sort of parts are available that they could swing Guillaume. I don't know what Guillaume would have needed other than a complete bike, because it was a case of just trashing all of his equipment. So I guess to make him happy and willing to go out there, he would have just wanted to be given everything, and then it can all be thrown away, which Yamaha isn't going to do. But I would be very curious to know their stance on Guillaume specifically. Gifting, not so much, because he is within a team. That team has a parts budget. That team has its own sponsors, whatever. But Guillaume is just his own man. And to be blunt, he's showing up a portion of the factory team, which I think is a great motivation for him.
Lewis, I have a question for you. Who is Noah Ludwig, and is he potentially Jorge Prado's best friend?
Because of his starts? Well, I don't think he's always been this starter, but Noah Ludwig has been around a while. Sarhol's KTM rider. He's just always been that kind of... I don't know if he's been on Sarhol. I can't think what team he was on in years previous. I don't think it was Sarhol's. I think he's...
No, I don't think so.
No, I think he might have been. It was a KTM team, I'm pretty sure. He's almost like your Kevin Bruman. Cut from the same cloth, just without this MXGP attention. Hence why this question gets raised, because we all know Kevin Bruman. It's impossible not to know him.
But we're kind of talking about privateers and the impact they can have against sort of the factory and the satellite hordes, and then suddenly you have Noah Ludwig, running with the leaders at the French Grand Prix. I find that random sight great, somewhat, encouraging. It was kind of heartwarming. Yeah,
and again, add that to Guillaume running top 5 in Argentina. There's a case to be made here that there's a resurgence. I wonder, speaking back to the PR point, I wonder if there's KTM factory racing PR. I feel like, and I've kind of talked to them about this before, there needs to be some sort of Pierre Mobility Group PR where they can celebrate these random feats from riders who are effectively on similar equipment to what a customer can buy. Obviously, it's quite difficult with conflicting sponsors and whatnot, but this is a great advertisement for KTM, as Guillaume is for Yamaha. And I just feel like it needs to be celebrated more. Other point, let me complete the Monsters Inc. trifecta on this podcast. The reason you know about Kevin Bruman and not Noah Ludwig is, in Monsters Inc., the barcode always covered Mike Wazowski. That's Noah Ludwig, and then Sully on the cover is Kevin Bruman. That's MXGP covering the privateers. But Noah Ludwig, like Mike Wazowski, is just blessed and happy to be there despite the barcode and other items covering his face.
I'm very confused now. You talk about Alex Kowalski or Mike Wachowski? I
Mike
am.
Wazowski. Please
Wazowski.
have some respect. Yeah. No, they're one in the same. They're one in the same. You know, there are some people in the paddock. You know, I'm not even going to make that joke. That's too far. Let's move on to MX2, I think. Although, let me tell you, we've had a lot of Yamaha talk. Maybe it's time to give It fits every model from 2002 all the way to 2021. Yep, you heard that right. 2 decades. This isn't just a plastics kit. You're getting the full package, a brand new gas tank, a complete seat, an airbox, and of course, a full set of fresh plastics to make your ride look factory new. As for the price, well, you'll want to check that out for yourself at Polarsport because it is a game changer. Thank you to Polarsport and Prox Pro X for their support of this podcast. And you know what? Let's just go straight into it. Talking about this privateer power, the way privateers make a difference is they head to pro-x.com because that's where you can find parts, aftermarket parts, to give your bike that extra little edge. No matter what it is, there's a wide array of products, supplies there for whatever your bike is, make, model, year, it does not matter. To make it even easier for those of you who are mechanically challenged, like myself, there's a parts finder where you can literally enter your bike and it will show you all that Prox has to offer. And I guarantee you this, you will be surprised by just how much Prox has to offer. It will open your mind to just how easy it can be to not only maintain your bike, but take it to the next level. So thank you to Prox as well as Polarsport for their support of this podcast.
Wow.
What? No?
No, that was amazing. Well done.
That was off the cuff as well.
Oh, you're kidding. I thought you were reading something.
No, the Polarsport one was a read, but the Prox one I just have to go off the cuff. Easier that way. Yeah, you know what? I'm proud of that.
I took a photo of you earlier in the Pulp MX host chair, Lewis. Maybe there's room for a changing of the guard in the near future.
Well, he's downstairs. Go and ask him.
Well, I thought he was in the glue factory.
Well, soon. MX2. Congrats, Adam. Or should I say, well, Adam, you can't have a Adamo without Adam, is what I should say.
Just add the O. Add the O.
I really had to process how to get that out for a moment. No, this was good. I complimented Adamo last week, said that I could see marked improvement over last year. He looks much more like a championship elect. This is good. Do I think he's a favourite? By no means. Do I think he's a contender for 2 to 4 Grand Prix wins this year? Sure. And that's fine. That's where Adamo's place is, I think.
Okay, so then who is your favourite for MX2 World Championship this year? Because I still think we have 4 riders, at least. And that's why, based on everything we've said so far for the MXGP class, MX2 is suddenly kind of the hotbed of interest in Grand Prix racing at the moment.
Honestly, it's so hard to pick a favourite, but I will go with Kai de Wolf purely based on the fact that he was a champion last year, so he knows how to get it done. And I do feel like despite the various issues, mechanical on Saturday and whatnot, some crashes and mistakes at other races, I do think I've seen an element of consistency across each round that gives me faith that he can come out on top at the end.
Yep. Good argument. You could say the same, but kind of to a lesser extent with Adamo. He's certainly more competitive this year. Far probably less likely to take moto checkered flags. I mean, I would still give that nod to somebody like Liam Everts or Simon Lagenfelder, but Adamo is entering that kind of 2023 phase of being able to sort of post those top 3, 4, 5 results week in, week out. So then the emphasis is going to be on Kai and the others to match that sort of ceiling. But, all credit to the Italian because this was his first win since, Finland, 23. Yeah. So it's well earned and it's timely as well because it just bunches up the championship points even more. It gives us something more to talk about. And, I think it was also a great weekend for Rebel KTM as well. Lucas Kuhnen finishing on the podium in the Premier class and Lagenfeld coming through. The best thing was that thanks to Thibaut Benistan, we had a grandstand finale in the second moto. Full props to Benistan for doing something we haven't really seen that much in the past and really letting it hang out and just taking some big risks to try and get the win in front of the home crowd. But then, we didn't have full confirmation of the overall standings would really be until sort of the last minutes of the race, which is ultimately what you always want from a Grand Prix.
Yeah, superb second MX2 moto. Are you adamant, or should I say, are you adamant?
Are you just trying to work out as many? Am I adamant or
Are you adamant? Are you adamant that Adamo is the best KTM rider in this series, or maybe the best hope for KTM has of the MX2 title? Tough question.
Yeah. In the overall rounded package, yes, because even you yourself have been critical of Simon Lagenfelder and what he's able to bring to MX2 on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis or whatever. And just little things like having had the experience of winning the championship. He's obviously he's sorted out the 250 SXF from last year where he was having setup problems with it. I'm not sure if it was through suspension or some other kind of ailment. There was some issue, obviously, of course, last year that prevented Adamo having a decent championship defense.
I believe the issue was Adamo. How would you put it kindly? I think the issue was Adamo buying into his own hype after the MX2 title, being shocked that people were so much better than him in 2024, and then throwing the kitchen sink at everything around him unjustifiably because he couldn't fathom how this is getting away from him.
Yeah, that has to be part of it because Liam Everts was winning Grand Prix on the same motorcycle, and Sasha Kunin as well was, making progression. And then it was also to do with the emergence of like the Nestan Husqvarna team, and both Lucas Kunin and Kaider Wolf, as you say, that things became a little bit more difficult for Adamo in 2024. Maybe he has mentally reset a bit more, and I don't think you can underestimate how important it is to have Joel Smets in your corner, and helping to sort of marshal and create that challenge. I think that's also a big asset, something that Lagenfelder doesn't have. But having said that, Lagenfelder is in the Ducati team, and they certainly know a thing about winning championships and with different riders.
React to this statistical analysis for me. Lagenfelder.
Oh, here we go.
Lagenfelder won his 15th MX2 moto at the weekend. Adamo won his 7th. Despite this, Lagenfelder only has 3 Grand Prix wins. Adamo is a world champion with, I believe, now 4 Grand Prix wins, or maybe just 3 also. Hold on, I can get that for you right now. No, also 3 for Adamo. So they're tied on Grand Prix wins, but Lagenfelder is streaks ahead in moto wins. And of course, there's a world title between the two. Thoughts?
Does that reflect badly on Simon?
Or does that shine a brighter light on the fact that Adamo maybe isn't the force that the world title maybe leads you to believe?
Does it also shine a light on MX2 and how, I don't know, there's this greater parity there after many years of being dominated by respective riders, whether it's Marvin Muscan, Jeffrey Herlings, Jorge Prado, Tom Vial, Maxime Renault popping up as well. Now we have riders taking away sort of winning opportunities from each other.
Well, the 7 and 9 Grand Prix wins for Kunin and De Wolf gathered respectively last year kind of dispel that point, I'd say.
Yes, but then that was a classic championship duel. And of course, we've seen those in MX2 over the years as well, thanks to Gertz and Vial. But, we haven't seen too many riders like this multi-sequencing tears, have we? I mean, I think Kunin's towards the end of 2024 was maybe one of the longest winning sequences we've had. I would like to say since Prado, in 2018, 19.
The paddock has sent the bat signal, the L signal in the sky for Lewis, and wanted me to communicate something on his podcast, which I have been meaning to bring up. And I don't know how to again do it delicately. Adamo has a slight tendency to cut the track. And when I say slight tendency, dare I say a weekly habit of cutting the track without being punished. And there are a lot of people up in arms about this because A, it's going unpunished, but B, Adamo really seems to show no concern about these creative lines, if you want to put it that way. There was another example of that. I think it was Moto 1 in St. Jean, which you credited Paul Mallon earlier, but I have to say his commentary of that was he didn't gain an advantage. Yeah, but that was blatant playing fast and loose with the rules, I think, because cutting the track or going off the track and not gaining an advantage means that effectively you've gained the position of just never going off the track. You must gain a disadvantage. Not like the rule in my mind should not be, oh, he didn't gain an advantage. It should be, did he have a disadvantage? Because he needs one.
Yeah, I can't be contrarian to you on this one, Lewis. I agree. I think the only mitigating factor is, was it done through preservation or safety? Was he about to hit someone or have an accident himself? Maybe that comes into the judgment of the situation. But, it's not his first time doing it. But
he's got more track cutting violations than he does moto wins, that's for sure.
But maybe that shows a certain amount of guile, win at all costs mentality.
I don't know. I do think this needs to be looked at some point because it is getting a bit egregious. Yeah, I don't know if there's a defense, and I realise that you can't have Adamo without Adam, but and you may want to wheel and deal your way around this one, but I don't quite know. That was a play on.
Please don't paint me as some super fan. I just think that Adamo should be given more credit because he's a good rider.
He's a good rider.
Okay.
I don't know if there's some sort of ruling where good riders are allowed to play fast and loose with track limits.
No, of course. Okay. Yes.
So we're watching you, Adamo. Just let's leave it at that. Much better race for Benistant, continuing some positive form from Kozar. So that's good to see. Still not quite, I'd say, at the heights that I'd expect from Benistant, but certainly more flashes of life than we've had previously, which is good, and consistently now as well. Liam Everts and Kyle Wolf were 4th and 5th. I would argue that St. Jean isn't the best circuit for either rider, so to come out with a 4th and 5th is fine. I still remember 2022, De Wolf was just nowhere at St. Jean, so I still see that marked improvement on hard-packed, slick, old-school tracks.
Yeah.
He had a couple of red play holder.
Yeah, and he had a couple of near misses, and I think as we did an interview with Rasmus Jorgensen on the Pulp Show as well this week, and I think this was more of an indication of where Liam is at the moment in terms of sort of full race potential. I mean, he made the starts, he was passed, he was riding within himself and his capabilities. That was something that was good enough to win in like the ooze of Kozar and the Grand Prix of Castilla-La Mancha, but he didn't. There were riders willing to put it out there a little bit more in St. Jean, but it paid off. And I think that kind of what was that stupid saying he used to, something about a monkey catching a monkey or something.
Slowly catching a monkey.
Yeah, just we're never going to say that saying again.
I realise I am saying it wrong because it's actually softly catchy monkey. But same thing.
Right. Well, we will never mention it again. It just popped into my head as like an example for Liam's plight at the moment because it could be a very effective tactic, certainly in the first half of the season, and until he builds up to a point where coming back from that broken neck, he's going to be, a little bit more. I don't know, the intensity might be there a bit more.
We have to go, but before we go, we can't end this podcast without talking about Sasha Coonen's two potentially career-ending crashes. I mean, Sasha Coonen has a reputation for being a crasher, but the two crashes in St. Jean exceed his history, I'd say, and I don't really know what to say other than I have concern.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly lucky. Somebody must have spoken to him about this approach, but then maybe if you do sort of cut that away, then you don't have the same rider. I mean, that's just sort of his style at the moment, but I mean, he's playing really, really hard and loose with what he can do on the bike on particular tracks. I think the rookie phase, the overexcitable phase is over now. There is time for a little bit more measure, a bit more maturity, a little bit more evaluation of conditions around him. You have the whole shot in a second moto, you're leading down the hill. I think he said in a quote somewhere that he didn't really know the reason why he lost sort of control. I mean, Paul said on the commentary that he was cross-rutted. I haven't seen it back sort of too many times, but just big incidents.
I wonder if such a small rider maybe struggles to, what would you say, have a gauge for how the bike's responding, because it always feels like such a handful beneath you that you struggle to feel the difference between handful and oh shit moment, Like maybe that's a complete fucking stupid thing to say, but I feel like there could be some merit in it where he has so little control over the bike because of his size that he doesn't really have a gauge of where the danger is versus this is normal. I don't know.
No, I just think this is all action approach. I just wonder if he's capable of making a top 5 start and then thinking of the race as like a 30+2, and how he can pace himself, and where he can find more effective lines, where he can really assess the riders ahead of him, and where are their weaknesses. All of this stuff, all of this complexity is something he really should have got a grasp on by now. Maybe he has shown it in other races, but I don't recall ever really seeing any good examples. And Koonen's kind of taken on the Prado modus operandi of making that fast start, leading from the front and disappearing. There has to be a few more strings to the bow than that, I think, to justify being sort of a Red Bull KTM factory racing rider, and most importantly of all, to keep healthy.
And speaking of Red Bull KTM factory racing riders keeping healthy, let's end with this. Jeffrey Herlings' predictions for Sardinia, go.
Top 5.
Okay, I say podium with 15 minutes of magic. And then the lack of race time catches up and maybe filters back to third. But I think there will be... My prediction is that at some point in the weekend, there will be a burst of speed and talent that makes you go, oh, Jeffrey Herlings is back.
Well, he's done it before, and I think Calvin Verlandren's going to be strong at that Grand Prix. I think Glenn Koldenhoff is pretty fast at the moment on the Fantic. We haven't spoken about him in this podcast. I think there's a few more riders, people who certainly know their kind of skills in the sand are going to be contributing to this thing. So it's not like a case of Jeffrey's going to roll into the paddock and might just have to worry about Tim Geiger. I think, he's going to have to be very realistic of the whole situation and his whole predicament, and just look at it as a way of logging race miles against premier competition. I like to think that's what he does, but then his capabilities and Jeffrey's inherent mentality to excel means he won't be outside the top 10.
Well, let's recap or end with this. Potentially, all of this information on this podcast may be rendered irrelevant, because in a week's time we could get a PR telling us that in fact there's a lot going on in the paddock that we never knew about. Perhaps every rider's injured and those who are doing well are the only ones who are uninjured. Who knows? You can never quite rely on information in this... Some call it the information age. Others, this industry perhaps isn't quite there yet. What's on our bucket list? Well, not bucket list, on our to-do list. I really want to look into the benefits of being an OAT team in the current landscape. Keen to learn more about Renault's frame, and also Geiser's switch to KYB, so we'll work on that. And yeah.
Look, I would like you to know that it's good, and I think it's healthy to have a little bit of cynicism in life. But I think to go overboard is something dark for the soul. So don't get lost to that side too much, all right?
I don't know what this means. Am I walking uphill to school both ways?
Yeah, don't let the MXGP world bring you down because you feel that there's not enough transparency, because it's an age-old predicament that it's not going to change overnight.
Well, I realise that right now you're not celebrating me on this podcast, Adam, because you think I'm just doing a normal podcast, but tomorrow a PR drops that says that I've actually just had voice box surgery. So you'll be able to celebrate my performance after the fact, because right now it's a secret. No, absolutely ridiculous. I have no idea what we're doing anymore. Everyone should go and watch Monsters, Inc. before the next podcast, and you will have time, because next week is a week off for us. 5 weeks consecutive MXGP podcast shows made possible by Polisport and ProX/Prox. So thank you to those guys, and thank you to you for your continued support of this show. We really do appreciate it. MXGP returns, as will we, in 2 weeks when the MXGP of Sardinia takes place at Riola Sardo, with Jeffrey Herlings in attendance. Very exciting indeed. We will see you then.